right, thank you very much. Next, I'm going to introduce our speakers. The first one is Rebecca Gabryel. Rebecca is the oldest of 6 children, and she's from Michigan. She has been going to pro-life events with her mom since she was 5 years old and can't remember a time when she wasn't actively involved in the movement. At 14, as a freshman in high school, she felt called by God to become more vocal about pro-life and started a local chapter of Rock for Life. During high school, she also spoke at different events about being a voice for the unborn. Sidewalk counseled at the local abortion mill, attended the March for Life, and protested outside many Planned Parenthood and pro-abortion events. After high school, Rebecca entered the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist in Ann Arbor, where she spent a year and a half discerning her vocation with that community. Through that process, she came to discover God's will for her is marriage, and that his ministry for her is to be a full-time pro-life activist and missionary. This past summer, Rebecca interned with Stand True Pro-Life Outreach, which is located up in Troy, Ohio, and recently took a full-time position there as Director of Communications for the organization. Rebecca is going to share with us what she's been doing this summer and her little trip down to Texas. Rebecca?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank all of you for coming here. They asked me to come out and just kind of give some inspiring words about what our missionary team was doing this summer, but really I wanted to thank all of you. Everybody always tells us that we inspire them by giving of ourselves for the summer to do full-time pro-life work, but really it's all of you that make what we do possible, and it's so important that we work together. And I just have to say, just to give an example of the type of pro-life activism that I love to do, I was home visiting my family this past week up in Michigan, and I've spent the whole summer doing pro-life work down here in Ohio and across the United States, and I went home and I just couldn't turn off being an activist. So my brothers play football. One of them is graduated, but 2 others one's on the varsity football team, and then the other plays basketball. And I went home and I'm like, we should do pro-life chalk outside of the school, we should do this. And they're pro-life, but they were mortified. They're like, you do that, we will never say that we're with you, our friends will not know that you're our sister. And I was just like, okay, fine. But my mom and I were able to still do some pro-life stuff while I was home, which I'll be talking about later. Just to recap, in case any of you are not familiar with Stand True, which is our ministry, we are a Christ-centered pro-life outreach, and we activate, educate, and equip people, especially young adults, to go out and be the generation that will abolish abortion. And we do this especially because this past year marked the 40th anniversary of Roe versus Wade. And our ministry, a lot of people believe this, but we especially emphasize that we feel like we've gone through the 40 years of darkness now, and this is the time where we are the generation that will abolish abortion, and this is the turning of the tide. Clinics are closing everywhere. For many of you, I hope you're familiar with Kermit Gosnell and the case in Philadelphia. I was at the trial and the day of the closing arguments there in Philadelphia, and it highlighted how horrific abortion was and how evil abortionists are, and how beautiful it is when so many former abortionists came forward and also testified to say how horrible the act of abortion was. And that really highlighted in the news, the little bit that they covered, just the horror of what goes on at places like this and how we need to shut down this place. One story I especially wanted to talk about before I hit Texas was we just celebrated the memorial of 9/11 and remembering all those who died when the World Trade Center collapsed. And I had the chance this summer when our missionary team was in New York City to go to the 9/11 memorial, and it was a very powerful experience just to be in that place where they're rebuilding and still cleaning up in some ways, and you can still feel what happened there. But on the wall where they have the names of all those who died, you actually see where they list a woman's name and her unborn child. And we found 3 of those, but unless I'm mistaken, there's actually many more. So how sad is it that even there they recognize the humanity of these children, and yet at a place like this, they refuse to, and in many ways our government refuses to. Another place that I had the chance to be this year was I went to Texas for 1 week, and I worked with Abby Johnson, who many of you I hope are familiar with. She's a former Planned Parenthood Worker of the Year who became pro-life. I spent the week with her in Texas. I went down on the Students for Life bus. There were about 50 young adults from, I believe they said, 15 different states who hopped on this bus and just went down to Texas to support them. And I know there's going to be more talk a little bit later about what actually was House Bill 2 in Texas and how it changed things. But I just really wanted to highlight the importance of prayer, because this rally, that's what it's really all about. We're here to pray, because at the end of the day, the government may control whether abortion is legal or not, but it's going to be prayer and sacrificing that ends the Holocaust in this country. And while I was in Texas, what won the day, it may say the votes on the news, but what won the day in Texas was every single day during that whole week of voting, as soon as the doors to the Capitol building opened, there were local men and women who were first in line to get into the Capitol building, and they prayed from the time that door opened until it closed in the rotunda. They held signs that had scripture on them, crucifixes, they were reading scripture aloud and singing hymns, and they would not give up the center of the Capitol building. Even when the pro-abortion rallies were going on, they would form a circle of prayer, and there would be hundreds of pro-aborts standing around them and screaming in their faces. I personally was in the center of that, kneeling and praying during one of the pro-abortion rallies, and there were people who were swearing in our faces at the church, blaspheming, and probably one of the most vulgar displays of humanity that I've ever seen in my whole entire life. But those few pro-lifers who constantly, they were on shifts. For 1 hour they would go in and then 5 more go out. They were constantly praying. And that's won Texas. On the news, yes, the vote was important, but it was the prayer. And it's all of you who come to 40 Days Here that will end the killing here. It is prayer that will end the killing in our nation, and it is prayer that will turn our nation back to God and to the respect for life from conception to natural death. And then one more story that I also wanted to share with you, especially, it just happened yesterday. The story goes much farther back, but the end of the story in many ways happened yesterday. In Michigan, before I became involved down here in Ohio, in high school, about 30 minutes from where I live in Michigan, in Flint, there is the abortion clinic owned by Alberto Hodari. And not many of you probably heard about him. Locally, he's one of the most notorious, he is known to be the most notorious abortionist in Michigan. He has killed the most babies in Michigan, and he's also killed multiple women. Outside of his clinic in Flint is where I got my first taste of standing outside of a place like this. And just to give you an example of how horrible it was, this place is horrible, but in Michigan, he would go in to kill in the front of his building, but in the back he had the garage for his classic cars, and he'd walk through a door and go with the mechanics who worked back there on his classic cars. He had millions of dollars worth of cars which were covered in blood from the babies that he killed, because that's how he funded them. We have a pro-lifer that we know snuck into him speaking at the local university, and we have on tape him actually saying that sometimes he did so many abortions and went so fast that he didn't have time to wash hands or change his gloves in between abortions, and he would just go from woman to woman to woman, and that the uterus is not susceptible to disease, so you didn't even have to worry about washing your hands. And he also told the medical students at this rally we taped him at that it was okay to lie to your patients and they should make that a practice. So he was encouraging them and all these things, and it was horrible, but we were able to use that to educate people outside on the sidewalk. We'd have signs with these quotes and where they could find the videos, and a lot of women changed their minds about that, because even if we can't get them to see the humanity of their children, often they're selfish enough not to want to go to that place because of the things that the abortionist did, and then from there we were able to talk to them. My family has prayed outside of that clinic for 10 years, and yesterday was actually the last time that I will ever go to that place, because last month it closed after being open since 1923. And the reason I bring up this story, even though it's from Michigan, is because it was prayer that closed that clinic. My personal mentor and friend went every Tuesday, and I went with her, to the sidewalk for 4 hours, much like Vivian does here. And she would talk to the women going in, but we constantly prayed. Really, if we weren't talking to anybody about pro-life or what was going on in that place, we prayed. We were on our knees. We held rallies like this. We had priests and pastors and youth groups come out. Whatever it took to get people out there to realize the importance of praying at that place. And Judy, my very dear friend, she actually passed away recently from cancer. So the past year, she wasn't able to be on the sidewalk, and somebody had to take her place. And yet, in all her suffering and struggling from cancer, she offered everything and was praying for the closing of that place. So in the end, just because they have lawsuits and other things going on that maybe in the news, that's why they had to close, I know really and truly that that place closed because of the prayer that happened there. And I also know because all of you are here praying, and because at the next rally you're going to bring somebody else, and then they're going to bring somebody else, and you will all be praying here, that I believe we will shut this place down. This place will no longer be open here. And so just in closing, I would like to encourage you not only to come here and pray, and to bring those you know here to pray. I would encourage you to pray at home. I would encourage you to offer sacrifice. 40 Days for Life is coming up. Even if you can only take an hour a week to come here and pray during 40 Days of Life, that doesn't mean you can't take an hour of day when you're not here to pray for the closing of it as well. And I would also encourage all the young people that are here. I'm involved in youth outreach, and I want to tell you that maybe your parents dragged you here, maybe you came by yourself, but we are the generation that will abolish abortion. And if you don't join us with all the other young people across the country who are standing up to be a voice for life, you are going to miss out. Because one thing I saw, we are loud, we are strong, we are not afraid, and I would just encourage you, bring your parents, bring your friends. They don't have to be the one to encourage you. You can be the one who can go out and encourage others. And really, we need you, because 40 years has been long enough, and we don't want another 40 years of this Holocaust in our country. So I would encourage everybody, especially the youth though, to come here to the sidewalk and to do everything that you can to end abortion, because we are the generation that will abolish abortion. So thank you.